Enough. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on The Yard. This is our second season of The Yard, believe it or not. It's 5 p.m. or a little bit afterwards, which can mean only one thing. It's time to join you all on The Yard. The Yard is a production of Commissary Club, commissary.club. Commissary.club is the first social network for Americans with criminal records. My name is Richard Bronson. I am the founder and the CEO of Commissary Club, as well as 70 Million Jobs, which is the national employment platform for folks with records. Tonight, as always, I am joined by my two very dear friends and teammates. Number one, playing center for the LA Lakers. Please welcome Seth Sundberg. Hey, Seth, how are you?
What's up, Richard? That's becoming my favorite part of the week now. I get the flashback on The Yard and on the hoop game too.
On the court.
Seth is a professional basketball player. He used to play with a young Kobe Bryant. And joining us as well is the myth, the legend, the rap artist and entrepreneur to the stars, my dear friend Divine. Hey, D, how are you, sir?
What's going on, Richard? Great to be here once again.
It's great to have you once again. The three of us, of course, sad to say, have all done time. Someone who hasn't done time is the brains behind our operation. That's none other than Adrian Hatter, who is sort of running things behind the scenes. Hello, Adrian. Lovely to see you again. Last week, we were not on Zoom because last week, as some of you know, we did The Yard on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is the red hot audio social network that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We had on The Yard Shaka Senghor, who's a very, very prominent player in criminal justice reform. He wrote a best-selling book. He's best friends with Oprah Winfrey and other celebs of that nature. And we had about 1,000 people there. So that was a gas. But frankly, we missed sort of the vibe in our Zoom crowd and with all of you. So it's good to be back here. We will be from time to time having The Yard on Clubhouse again. We have upcoming some, very exciting people who lots of people would love to see. I'll talk about that at the end, how if you weren't able to see it in the past, we'll see if we can help you get on to Clubhouse. Before we get started and I introduce our guests to you, I want to just sort of lay out again what the goal here is. We are aiming to connect people, essentially, like we try to do on Commissary Club. And specifically, the target or the audience that we're after are people with records. We think that it's high time that folks with records are available to help one another, to serve as role models, even to inspire one another. And none of that goes on, and we think that's a shame. And we also are really eager for people to who don't know others who have had records, to sort of know that these people are much more than the crime that they may have or may not have committed. And that, in fact, they share the same humanity that everybody else does. So we're eager for people to see that. And as much as possible, we'd like for folks who have never been to prison, and I'm not suggesting that you should, do whatever it takes to go to prison. It's best to avoid. But we'd like you nonetheless to understand sort of what the experience is about. We think that if you understood it, that ultimately this world would be a much better place, because if you fully understood it, you'd recognize some of it is pretty awful and oughtn't be that way. So what we try to do is sort of simulate taking you out onto the yard. Now, the yard, no matter what the prison is, there's a yard. And that's where people who are incarcerated, that's where people can connect with one another and share. They can laugh together. They can yell at each other and argue. A lot of that goes on. And sometimes there are opportunities to feel pretty sad too. Times that you feel like you want to cry, but you kind of avoid the impulse to cry, because out on the yard, crying is a sign of weakness, and weakness in prison is something that you want to avoid at all costs. We're gonna, of course, encourage you to ask questions. Number one, there's a chat facility at the bottom of the screen, and please type in questions or points you'd like to share or insights that you have. And, we'll try to address them as we go along. Sometimes we'll ask a couple of people to actually join us in the yard if they'd like and join the conversation. Now, one thing I want to ask is, certainly how a person ended up in prison is important, and it's certainly important what happens to them when they leave prison. But for the sake of this discussion, please, if possible, confine your comments, confine your questions to the actual in-prison experience, because that's what we really want to focus on. We're going to ask our guests about what they're working on now towards the end of the show, so they'll have an opportunity to share that with you. But we really want to focus about the in-prison experience. So we're going to do something that we've done every single episode of The Yard, and that's sort of to simulate and get us into the right space. So what I would ask everybody, first of all, is just to take a deep breath and let out their breath slowly. Now, if you wouldn't mind, trust me on this, please close your eyes. Close your eyes and just sort of, let your mind wander for a moment. And in your mind's eye, imagine, if you will, that, maybe it's last night, you were with your family or your friends or alone, and you had a couple of drinks, not a lot. You weren't drunk, but you had a couple of drinks. And for whatever reason, you needed to go somewhere. So you got behind the wheel of your car, your Range Rover, you hopped in, your BMW, whatever it is. And you're in your car and you're driving along and you have your phone by your side and you hear a beep because you just received a text message while you were driving. And, no big deal. That happens all the time. And like most times, you take a quick look over to see who sent you the text message. Is it something important? Whatever. You take a look. Except just at that moment that you turn to look at your phone, there were a couple of neighborhood kids started crossing the street. And it was dark and you didn't see them as they were crossing the street because, of course, you were looking down at the phone. And unfortunately, you banged into one of them. You hit somebody with your car. And you'll never forget that moment because, while everything was a blur then, there were sirens all of a sudden, there were police, there were flashing lights. But through the blur, you knew in your heart of hearts that somehow your life had just changed forever. That all of your hopes and your dreams and your plans in that moment were just destroyed. Because what's going to happen is your friends are going to abandon you, like almost literally overnight. And even family members, they're going to desert you. Because, of course, as far as the law is concerned, you were guilty of drunk driving. And one of those teenage kids that crossed the street just as you were harmlessly, innocently looking down at your phone, well, I'm sad to report that one of those girls died when you hit her. That's what happened. Now, let's continue imagining. It's 2 years later, and you just woke up from sleep. And you realize as you wake up, in that moment when you're just sort of becoming aware of where you are, you're lying in a cot and you look to the front of your eyesight and you see that there are bars on the door. And you notice that your head is within inches of a stainless steel toilet, which is also attached to a stainless steel sink. That's where you've been sleeping. And on the other side of you, there's someone else who's waking up just as you are, except this person is coughing and wheezing for air. And what goes through your mind is, holy shit, this person and I are breathing the same exact air. And you have this flash that this person, there's a good shot, has contracted the coronavirus. And that's whose air you've been breathing. And it all comes flooding back to you that you're in prison and that you're going to be there for the next 6 years. And that's a sad, sad kind of awareness to wake up to. But once a day, the prison gives you sort of a reprieve when they let you out onto the yard. This big, open, flat field. And out in the yard, if you want, you can toss around a football. You can go to what they call the weight pile, where you can work out. Or you can do what you've done the last year every day, and you're going to do for the next 6 years. You're going to walk over to the area where your friends that you've made in prison, well, that's where they hang out, and you're going to go hang out with them once again. And for you, for everybody there, these moments are very special, because if only for a few minutes that you're out on the yard, now you're not a number. Now you're not an animal. Once again, you can remember that you're a human being, just like you were before that night when your life spiraled so badly out of control. So now I'm going to ask you to open your eyes, come join us out on the yard. I got some people I'd like you to meet. First, we have got with us a gentleman that you're going to enjoy meeting. His name is Lewis Conway, Jr. 25 years ago, Lewis thought he'd try his hand at drug dealing. His first deal, as I understand it, went south when somebody stole his stash. Lewis tracked down this guy and he ended up killing him. Lewis was able to plead down his... No, did I get that wrong? No, okay, I thought I heard something. Lewis was able to plead down his case, and he ended up doing 8 years in prison and another 12 years on supervised release. Since then, he's been busy as a writer, a producer, a director, an editor, and lately he has been working as a political strategist with the ACLU, most notably working on probation and parole reform, some vitally important issues. And last but not least, let me please add that it also happens to be his birthday today. Oh, Lewis, thanks so much for joining us, and happy birthday.
Brother, blessed born, man.
Thank you. Nachos. Hey, we're doing nachos later, man, for your birthday.
Yeah, nacho time.
It's funny, my wife just found a place to have some.
There you go.
Steph, we need tomato and onion and a green pepper.
I got you. Maybe a green
pepper.
So we're waiting for another gentleman who is supposed to join us, and I hope he can make it. Dr. Derek. A very interesting story too. We're trying to get a hold of him. Certainly, we hope there's no problem here. But let's sort of get this going here. Lewis, you know, yours is an interesting story. We work Divine, Seth and I, and Adrian and others, we work with literally thousands of formerly incarcerated men and women. And we are constantly talking about, we notice that it's so common. People come out of prison, and while you might imagine that people come out of prison and the last thing they want to have anything to do with is prison or people who are in prison, they want to put that behind them. And yet the opposite is true. These folks feel a need to help and work with their brothers and sisters who are going through the criminal justice system. I mean, I guess that's what Seth and I and Divine and Adrian are doing too. My guess is that you never expected that you were going to end up yourself locked up. Is that true? And tell me, what was the first immediate impression when you took that one step from freedom to on the other side of the gate? What was going through your mind at that moment?
First, let me say thank you, everyone, for all the birthday wishes. Thank you, Seth, Divine, and Richard for having me. Thank you, Adrian, for facilitating the conversation. Thank you all.
All right, enough already. We're not that nice.
No.
Keep going.
I work for the ACLU, so there's a
Oh yeah, right. You got to be nice.
Anyway, what I remember most, so I spent 9 months in the county prior to actually going to prison because of the way the Texas prison system worked back then. There was an overcrowding situation. So I spent 9 months in the county before I caught the chain in prison. And the one thing that stood out to me the most, right? And this is funny because I think I've only told my wife this story. So, the rules are different in jail than in free world, and you really don't know that when it's your first time. So in the free world, I was used to I slept nude. Like, that's what I did. I slept in the nude. So when I got in my cell, when it was time to go to sleep, I got butt naked and I went to, I was in my cell. So I wake up in the morning and my cellie, he's got this weird look on his face. And he's looking at me really weird. And I'm like, last night everything was good. What's going on? And he's like, hey man, I know it's your first time and I know you told me you ain't never been locked up before, but there's certain things we gotta talk about, man. And I was thinking, oh no, here's the talk about the shanks,
right.
We're gonna talk about how to, we're about to have this whole deep gangster talk, right?
Right, or I'm your new husband.
And he's like, bro, I've had several people stop by the cell and ask me about you. I was like, what? That's not right. He said, well, I woke up and you were sleeping on your stomach and you didn't have nothing on. And I don't know if you realize that you locked up. and you can't do that in here. And I think that was the first time I really realized that I was in a different world where things was not to like things that I took for granted in the free world, something as simple as something that you never even think twice about was literally became a make or break situation had I not handled it a certain way.
So how long did it take, man, to learn to wear
Put your clothes on?
Yeah, look at here. I showered in my underwear.
Well, unfortunately, Richard didn't.
Learn quick, yeah.
Oh, turning on me so quickly, D.
I don't think the air saw me naked again. From that
I had a similar situation related to nudity. I've been in, nice gyms all over the world and, health clubs and whatever. And, they have, lockers and a bench and you sit down and you get undressed and you put a towel around yourself and you walk to the shower, right? Now you guys are going to go, no, you don't do that. No, that's what you do. And I did that in prison. And when I came back, I had a couple of guys came over like, we need to have a talk. And well, I just took a shower. You're not going to tell me I smell, right? I know that. And they said, you don't do that in prison, you know, and I'd never been to prison. I didn't know that. They go, so I go, well, how are you supposed to do
and we
it?
liked what we saw, so you know, we just wanted to
Yeah,
do
right.
something.
It's not a question of taste here, but they said, I go, what am I supposed to do? You know, and they go, you go dressed into the shower, you bring the towel, you close the shower curtain, you get undressed, you take a shower, you dry yourself off, you get dressed again, and then you walk out. And that's the only way to do it. And I go, what, are you kidding? That's ridiculous. But that's one of the rules. What else did you learn that was surprising?
So again, you know, I was kind of brand new to the importance of soap operas. I really had no clue how attached people were to soap operas. I grew up
Which
with two
ones?
sisters.
Remember?
No, I hated them because I grew up with
Yeah.
two sisters and a mother, and the soap operas is what kept me from the cartoons. So I hated soap operas, and then I go to prison, and it's these big cock diesel dudes literally having knockdown, drag out arguments about Young and the Restless and General Hospital, and it was hard for it was hard for me to take it serious. I was like, "Are you serious, dude? Like, are y'all really about to fight about soap operas, really?" And I think that was when, you know, just the whole idea of the value system kind of, you know, set in on me, right? Like there was, you know, the free world doesn't prepare you for the value system that you know kind of runs prisons, you know. And in Texas, well, in the county, you were allowed to change the channel, and that was my first introduction to power in a very visceral sense. Like,
Could you explain what that means? I know where
so
you're
it's-
going. Where's the
So-
power play in here?
So, you know, in the free world, you really you know that there's segregation, and you know that there's a power structure in place, but it's kind of invisible, right? It doesn't play itself out the same way as it does in prison. And so, in prison, whoever has control of the TV is who has control over that pod. And so it's a very strategic, you know, it's almost like seeing someone challenge the throne by going and touch that TV if they're not the ones who control that TV, right? And from the outside looking in, you have no clue. You think it's just the TV.
Yeah.
And it's just the TV.
And it's something so unimportant to you either way.
Yeah.
It's something that, and because in the free world, it was something that you walk by every day, or that, you know, but in prison, it becomes that artifact of power.
Yeah.
It becomes that thing that which, you know, lines are drawn, and sometimes it's, you know, it determines whether or not a riot is going to happen. And then in prison, it kind of changes because you don't have access to it, and they have to do a channel check, right? And then a cop has to come in there and change the channel. But even then, it becomes a power move because whoever's on the bench determines what channel it's on. And, you know, there's a lot of politics around innocuous items in the free world that all of a sudden in prison carry this crazy currency that, you know, there's a crazy value attached to it in prison.
Yeah. So,
You know, I just want to, Seth, let me just, while it's up here, Angela, who's joining us. Hi, Angela. She said, this is a great line, the remote replaces the GAT. And a GAT, of course, is a gun. In other words, the remote is an item of power to execute, to wield control. And that remote is a benign object at home, but in prison, it's a sign. It's the scepter of the king or the queen.
Right, right.
And it can be challenged and all that stuff. And that's a great point. I mean, also, Lewis, to your point, was it controls people's emotions. It controls the mood of the pod, right? Or the mood of the TV room or wherever it was at, like whatever's happening. So you can go, oh, we're watching this tonight. And someone else goes, well, if you don't like soap operas, you're watching them anyways. So you're going to feel however you're going to feel. And there's all kinds of tense emotions and everything else going on.
I don't watch sports to this day.
I don't do push-ups.
Right.
Right.
Oh man, sports,
don't watch
forget about it. Forget about it.
Dee,
I'm
what was
telling you,
your
I've
favorite
seen-
TV show?
Yo, honestly, I never really indulged in TV like that because one, because of that, and two, because my focus is all about like self-development. So for me, TV was a distraction.
Yeah, there's guys,
When
but
people
there's
found it
guys.
as entertainment and escapism, I found it as a distraction away from me just bettering myself. And like I just became a model inmate. That was my whole focus. I wanted to get out as soon as possible. So I kind of focused on all that, you know?
Look, I was a nerd going into prison. So I got locked up in 92. The first time I was on the internet was 84. Right?
Wow.
I was on the internet. I was hacking, on an Apple IIc.
Wow, you have a coder.
Even before I went to prison. So I went to prison with a certain skill set and a certain mindset. So TV was never really like, I didn't watch TV. I watched MTV in the free world, right? But that was it. So when I went to prison, the day I stopped watching sports, I think it was the sixth game of the Houston Rockets and the Knicks when OJ decided to go on a chase. I was in Beeville, Texas.
Good TV.
I'm telling you, like that was the day that I stopped watching sports. I tell people all the time, and they ask me, who's your favorite? I said, man, Hostetler. I stopped watching sports when Hostetler was on the starting roster.
So let me ask you, Lewis. You said you came into prison. You were a computer nerd. You were new to the drug trade. So this was not the reality.
And I learned the drug trade in college. I got introduced to the first time I saw crack cooked was in my dorm room.
Wow.
Okay. Well, so you actually did learn in college. That's
physics and chemistry.
My question is this: you're a big guy. You look formidable. When you got into prison, did you feel like you had to assume that persona to say, I'm a big tough motherfucker? You don't know what I was in the past has nothing to do with what I need to be now.
So I struggled, right? So I've been big all of my life, and my mother used to always inculcate me as a child that I wasn't allowed to fight because I was going to lose even if I won, right? Because whoever I was going to fight was smaller than me. So I didn't go to prison with this tough guy attitude or this tough guy persona, but because of the type of a charge I had, I was perceived a certain way, right? And it's
so. Can you explain that? Can you go into that a little bit? That perception.
Right. I was charged with murder, but I was convicted of manslaughter. And when you show up on a unit, people know what you're there for.
Right.
Like there's some dude who works, there's somebody who works in transport, who's seen your paperwork, they gonna tell the people, right? So when you show up on the unit, they know who's there for what. Being big all of my life, I never presented myself as a bully. That was always important to me, right? Because the reason why the dude died that I dealt with was because I was scared of him. Had I not have been afraid of him, he wouldn't not have died. But he had a reputation that preceded him. And when I interacted with him, I didn't interact with him maliciously. I interacted with him in fear. So he died because I was afraid of him. So when I went to prison, I had to be very careful that I walked a certain way and I presented a certain way that was not weak, but was also not threatening. And the challenge is there's always a little dude.
Always.
Always a
It's
little
always
dude.
the little guys.
Napoleon.
Always the smallest dude. Like, and I was the kind of person that I read so many, I used to read the dictionary. Like that's what I used to do. So
Guilty.
I was minding, I didn't want no trouble. Like I want no trouble. And it was always the smallest dude would, you know, would I would
Biggest
end up
attitude.
having, I became very diplomatic. There's a reason why I I didn't have to.
You're a strategist.
Yeah.
Very, very, because I just couldn't afford. One, I'd already had a violent conviction, and I
Right.
couldn't afford to put my hands on anyone. Because in
So-
Texas, even back then, that was the case.
This is a fascinating sort of point that you're bringing out here. And it's really after I went on and on talking about, don't talk about what happens before, but I can't just let this go. Once again, Angela, Angela, we got to have you here all the time because this woman has some very, very insightful things to say. She writes, many crimes are a result of fear. Your crime was not that you were trying to get at someone, you were trying to make sure you got to them before they got to you, which you assumed would have occurred. So my question to you, you had plenty of time to think about this moment and this act, no doubt. What percentage of violent crime is a result of fear? How often is it people who are striking before they get struck and who really don't want to be doing it?
I would like to reframe that query and say, how many folks who have been convicted of a violent crime were victims first of a violent crime?
Interesting.
You?
I was robbed,
Okay.
right? That's what led to my encounter with him. Had I not been robbed, I would have never had an encounter with him.
Right.
Right. So I learned violence because I had violence
Perpetrated against
impacted on it imparted upon me. Right. So to answer your question, you know, I am want to say that the bulk of the folks who are currently incarcerated for a violence-related conviction, the result of that violence-related conviction is either trauma-based or they were the victim of a crime that led to them responding in a way that resulted in a violent act.
Wow.
Wow.
Interesting.
Okay, but to play devil's advocate here, Lewis, had you not been occupied in the drug trade, you wouldn't have been robbed, right?
Yes, that fact is true, but even prior to that, I had been falsely accused of harming someone. So when that happened, I had been accused of assault and had been accused of terroristic threat. I had been arrested on campus, and for no other reason, the person was able to say, I did it. He didn't have to have any proof. He didn't have to have any witnesses. All he had to do was say, I did it, and I had to prove I didn't do it. So once I went to jail for something I didn't do, I kind of had that attitude of, well, I might as well do something since I'm gonna go anyway. And in 88 and 89, there was kind of this collective thought that regardless what you do, as a Black person, you're gonna encounter the legal system by the time you're 18.
Right.
And undoubtedly, by the time I was 18, I had encountered the legal system and I was innocent. So, and I remember my attorney telling me to plead guilty because you know you did it.
Wow.
I remember that. And I remember how helpless I felt. because he lived across the street and my parents paid him and he watched me grow up. And I remember him looking me in my eyes and telling me, you need to plead out because you know you did it. I'm like, dude, I wasn't even there. I wasn't even there. So when it came time to deal drugs, and I didn't have to deal drugs. I came from a 2-parent household. I came from the suburbs. I told you I was on the internet in 84 and 85.
Right,
So
right.
I dropped out of high school and went to college. Right, I dropped out of high school and I ended up in a college program, and I ended up going to college full time. And at that time, the school I went to, they were recruiting a lot of people from Houston and Chicago, kids who were trying to escape, gangs and drugs. Well, they brought those cultures to Austin. Well, I grew up on the side of Austin that was not necessarily, Austin has historically only been 15% Black at the most, right? So I did not grow up in this urban, steeped in Black and cult. I grew up in Austin where the city motto is keep Austin weird, right? So when I showed up at HT, which is an all Black school, that was literally my first all Black experience, right? So I fell in love with the mystique of, Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords. Again, the first time I ever saw crack cooked, I had seen cocaine, I had seen acid, I had seen mushrooms, but I had never seen crack, right? And when they cut the crack up in these little small pieces, and they told me that each of those pieces were $20, well, I knew how to count well. And at that time, my dad was paying on my tuition. And so there was that tension of, you're going to do what I say because I'm paying for your tuition. And so I figured, well, if I can pay for my own tuition, then I don't have to listen to you, right? And so I'm
all right, but let's get back to let's get back to prison, okay? Because that's where we're all happiest. We're back in prison, and by the way, Joe Page also lived in Austin for 8 years. She loves Austin as well. So, a big shout out to Austin, the other Texas.
Yes, shout out to all y'all that are from Texas and live in Texas.
Yeah. All right. So you're in. Can you tell people the difference between county and where did you do state time or federal?
I did state time.
Can you explain the difference? People frequently conflate jail and prison. They don't realize they're two very, very different things. What are you laughing at, Divine?
Send me to jail.
No,
I hated jail.
Send me to prison.
I don't
prison.
Know.
Yes,
I want to go to.
I hated jail.
Send me to prison any day.
Yeah, I hated jail.
The difference between, I don't mean the difference, technically the difference, but what is the difference in living circumstances between the two?
The domain is the culture. One is permanent and the other one is transient, right? And so in the county, there's a culture of, I'm going to make bond. If you don't like your situation, we'll make bond, right? Well, in prison, when you hit the unit, some of those dudes have been there 10 or 15 years. So that's their home. And that's how they refer to it. This is my home. Their cell is their house. In jail, they may refer to it as their cell, right? But in prison, that's your home. And there's a strict culture of cleanliness. That is the one thing that you'll notice the difference between jail and prison is there's a culture in prison of, like, it's so deep that you couldn't even use the toilet in the cell. When I tell you that blew my mind, like, I was like, well, what do you mean we can't use the toilet? And it was shiny, the sink was shiny. Like, it looked like, the whole thing was shiny. And he was cooking in it, and he was washing clothes in it, and he was cleaning in it. And again, there's nothing in the free world that prepares you to see somebody reach into the toilet and pull out Like there's nothing that prepares you for that. There's nothing that prepares you to watch somebody cook a whole meal in a toilet and wash clothes in a toilet. And then in the middle of the summer, the coolest water that you'll find is in the toilet.
Yeah.
Straight up.
That's
Like,
Says to you,
the-
toilets
the-
get a
the-
bad knock against them. I mean,
They got a
toilets,
bad rep.
they have a
it's
bad
whole
rep.
different- It was. I never thought of. Listen, toilets was. Yeah, it was. It was. So that's the difference. Where, jail is where you go prior to being shipped out to prison or pre-trial, right?
Right.
And
So Seth, you
great.
were in jail for a long time, right?
Yeah, I was in jail for a year.
Okay. What was the difference between that and where you ended up eventually?
Oh, I mean, the jail that I was at in Santa Clara County was one of the oldest, I think, in the nation. They like sending me to old places. Even when I went to prison, I went to an old prison. So it was like nothing new for this guy, nothing new, all old shit. But then county was, so it was a real old spot, real dirty. I mean, Lewis, I gotta tell you, man, like two of the best opening, like first day prison stories that we've heard here on the yard, for sure. Two super insightful differences between, jail and prison, for sure, man. I mean, saying that it's transient and like it's just old and nasty and people don't give a shit about it. And like, I mean, it's also hard to give a shit about jail when you're like wearing somebody else's drawers, right? Like, you take them off, put them in. This dude, was detoxing in these things like, a week before, and now, clean them up and strap them on. So anyways, yeah, no, it was hell. Everything I've ever done wrong in my life, I was like, oh, okay. Like I feel like I paid for it in that first year in jail. I'm like, all right, cool. Like we're good. We're
Yeah, I
good.
paid my debt to society. I'm good.
Yeah, exactly.
The book things. Somebody brought up books, right? There's the life cycle of books in prison is amazing.
Yeah.
Right. There are books that will get. Like the life cycle of books is just simply amazing.
What did you have a favorite genre or author? Like John Grisham's huge, right? Like all of those.
I went through phases.
Everybody read him, man. Come on.
I went through phases. It began with the long arm, and then you go into the John Grishams, and then the Tom Clancy's, right?
Yep, exactly. You go.
It got to a phase where I told my sister, I don't want to read any more white authors. So she sent me a Black science fiction author named Octavia Butler.
Oh, yep. No.
And I became very, very adamant about only reading Black science fiction. Right. And so I became, I was already a site, Isaac Asimov, and I was always into science fiction prior. But after, you read just so much, the Tom Clancy's and what was the other one? The John Grishams and all of the Stephen Kings. Yeah.
Were you, Shaka Senghor last week told us how he became politicized,
yes,
and through his voracious reading, and he discovered religion. And it was a spiritual journey for him too, and where he, became involved with the Muslim faith. Did you go through any of that?
So I grew up a son of a pastor. My dad started pastoring churches, back when I was about 5 years old. I was actually ordained to preach as a minister in between my bond, while I was on bond before I went to prison. I was baptized as a Mormon in 15. But when I went to prison, there was a guy named Khalil. And, the first 2 or 3 months in prison was like a whirlwind. And I remember this guy over in his cubicle he was standing up and bending down and standing up and bending down. And I noticed that the cops showed him a certain amount of respect. You know, all of the prisoners showed him a certain amount of respect, and he just had this aura of peace about him. And at that time, I was still dealing with the fact that I killed someone, right? And I watched him, and I was like, I want what he's got. And I went and asked him, I was like, man, what are you? Like, what are you? And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, man, you, like, you know, the cops respect you, we respect you, and you doing this up and standing up and down thing, and I don't know what that is, but, and he's like, I'm Muslim. Now, I was introduced to the 5% Muslims, and I knew about, you know, the FOI and all of that. I was like, I ain't never met no Muslim like you. Like, I don't, what kind of Muslim are you? And that was when I was introduced to Al-Islam. And so I, you know, I took my Shahada in 93, 94. And it's peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. But Islam became the guardrails in which I was able to see my future within a framework of prison, right? Because I was determined to be a lone wolf in prison. I was determined. I wasn't gonna join no gangs. I was from Austin, and Austin is weird anyway in terms of like cities. So I couldn't fit in with Dallas or Houston or Fort Worth. So I was determined to be a lone wolf. But Islam gave me a sense of peace. Islam, when I read the Quran, having the background of the Bible and having a deep understanding of Christianity, Islam hit me at a certain place in my life where I needed peace, and I needed that strict, every day praying 5 times a day. I needed the talim. I needed to be able to study Arabic. I needed to learn Arabic. I needed that structure in my life at that time, because I was already intellectually stimulated in the free world, right? And I didn't have that same thing in prison, and Islam brought that to me, right? But it didn't come the same way for me as it came to other people, right? Islam for me came as a result of me seeing someone else have this aura of peace about them, and I was going through complete hell. Like, you know, every time I would close my eyes at night, I would see the same thing over and over, like me stabbing this guy, right? I would see.
You still see that, have that vision?
No, that stopped then, right? You know, like I can honestly say like 93, probably Marchish. You know, I said, you know, I laid it on the, you know, on the altar.
So I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
How did you? You're a strategist now, right? Did you always have a strategical mind and thinking? And if so, whether you had it or didn't have it in prison, how did you approach your time? How did you think about, I got this bid in front of me? Some people turn to violence, some people turn to gangs. Like, how did you approach that?
My goal was not to come back to prison. That's how I started prison. That was my goal, right? Because everybody with my last name and who is a male in my family has either died by gun violence or done time. From my grandfather on down. My grandfather did a life sentence for murder. My great-grandfather was on the run for killing a sharecropper. Every uncle, every cousin that has my last name and is a male, beside my father and my children, have been to prison. So
did you think that was your destiny as you were growing up?
Absolutely.
There was an inevitability of that in your life?
That's what I was telling you back when I was telling you when I was 18. I felt like I was destined, so I might as well sell drugs.
Right.
There's nothing that I can do that's going to stop me from not.
And you didn't have to sell drugs. You grew up with a two parent home.
I didn't have to sell drugs. Absolutely not.
That was
a choice. Yeah.
Okay. You could have also theoretically said, I'm going to break this cycle. It's within my, you know, I was brought up.
That's what I decided to do in prison. So that's how when Dee asked me, the way I approached time was I used to talk to people who were what we call 2 or 3 time losers.
Losers, yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I would interview them basically, and I would ask them what they did to come back. So by the end of my sentence, I had a list of what not to do.
That's
Come
brilliant.
back to prison. I had a list.
Strategical.
Yeah.
That strategy.
Like, you know what I mean? Because, and literally, that's how I stayed out of prison. Like, I stayed out of prison because I listened.
You still have that list?
That peer-to-peer network, and I didn't even know that that's what that was, right? I didn't
Recidivism.
know that, but it was folks who had been through what I was about to experience,
Right.
informing me on how they got back into this environment.
Okay.
Recidivating. People who recidivated.
Some of the funniest stories we hear from people, people who go to prison are incredibly adaptive and clever, and they figure out hacks to life in prison. And probably nowhere is that more obvious than when we talk about food and what people eat. Lewis, you with us? I think we lost your audio, Lewis.
Yes,
Your
I'm
audio
here.
is again. Now you go. Food in prison. I mean, Seth tells a story. He was working in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator he had to get a box of chicken parts. That was for dinner. And he noticed there was a label on the box that said, "Not for human consumption." That was what Seth discovered when he was working in the kitchen. So food in prison is generally not that good. It's fair to say. Some people come up with incredible responses to that because food isn't still important to them. What were you eating in prison? Were you one of these guys who went to the cafeteria no matter what, or did you have alternatives?
I was a food service clerk.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
so
You had
I was
access.
the
You had
one-
access.
I was the one that designed the menu for the unit. I was the one that ordered the food. And again, in Texas is that old convict system where the prisoners ran the system. So, and plus I was a nerd, with the computers. That just made the job easy for them. So I worked in the office. I was the one responsible for ordering the food, setting the menu. When they called lockdown, you knew we were going on lockdown when you heard Conway P55 report to food service at 2:00 in the morning. When you heard that, you knew we were going on lockdown. If they were calling Conway to food service, you knew something was happening. So I kind of was oriented to different. And in the beginning, of course, when I first hit the unit, it was peanut butter and oatmeal and graham crackers. That's how you stay alive. Kat told me, the first thing you buy for commissary is a loaf of peanut butter and a loaf of bread and a jar.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you buy. Don't buy nothing else.
I thought I'd get sick of peanut butter and jelly, but I still to this day love it.
I still eat it.
I can't do a
It
push-up.
never disappoints you.
It never
It's like a good
disappoints.
dog.
Consistently delicious.
It is. You get what you pay for.
Exactly.
And I answer Sid's question right quick. Sid asked, what do I think needs to change? And for me, I think realizing that there was a cycle in the first place.
Yep.
A lot of that was hidden from me. I didn't know that there was 100 years of incarceration in my DNA. And I think once I found that out, I became very oriented to breaking that cycle. So what I've done with my children is I've made sure that they are aware of my past. And I've made sure that they have seen me transform from who I was. And though I was not, I was never I didn't go to juvenile. I didn't go to, like, I was not this kid who was in and out of trouble. I hung out. I listened to Metallica riding around in a Vega in 1986, headbanging at a Merlin bong, riding around Austin. So I was not. We weren't trouble. We were troublemakers, but we weren't criminals in that sense, right? What became important for me was addressing the systemic challenges that made me believe I didn't have a choice. And one of the things that made me believe I didn't have a choice was, you know, even at 18 or 19, no one would hire me because I was big and I was Black. I was obviously capable of doing it, but I didn't have access. And so I have created opportunities for my kids. That's why I became a director. That's why I became an audio engineer. So that's
Let's talk about that in a little bit. When you got to prison, you know, and I sort of touched upon it, is big guy. Almost everybody talks about the racial overtones that predominate in prisons. That, you know, Black guys stay with Black guys and white guys stay with white guys, and where do they eat? This is the wrong table that you're at. And that, you know, if you're of one color, you're expected to stick up and fight for your group versus the other. Did you address, or did you have issues that you had to confront and negotiate as related to race in general in prison?
Absolutely. And I gotta, unfortunately, I gotta jump because it's my birthday and my wife has reservations for us. So the first thing I learned, I went to prison, I think I was 22. There was a dude that had been a little locked up since he was 16. And I think he was like 21. And I remember the first thing he told me is, white boys ain't got no rights. And I didn't know what he meant. Like, that didn't make no sense. I didn't know. I'm from Austin, so I didn't, what do you mean? And in the day room, all of the white dudes was sitting on the ground, and the Black dudes were on the front bench, and the Hispanic dudes were on the back bench. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And again, I'm from Austin, so we grew up around white people, and I'm engaging the white dudes, talking about Metallica and you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and all the Black dudes are looking at me like, man, what are you doing? And the first unit I was on, Torres unit, when I hit the unit, there was a riot. My cellmate was a Latino, and me and him were like cool as hell. So when the riot jumped off, I didn't know I was supposed to fight the Mexicans because I was Black. I didn't know that. I didn't have no problem with them, so I caught the wall. I'm standing on the wall like, ooh, 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 right? And I didn't know that I was supposed to be mad at the Mexicans because I was Black, because my cellmate was Mexican, and I didn't know. So I got back to the cell, and I was like, are we mad at each other? Did something happen?
Are you mad at me?
Did something happen? And he was like, nah, man, it was something. It was over a fucking piece of cake. But anyway, that's another story. Yeah. So I didn't understand. I was always in the middle of it because I refused to choose sides based on race. I had Black friends, I had Mexican friends, I had white friends. Again, I grew up in a neighborhood where there were 3 Black families. My dad speaks perfect Spanish, or he did speak Spanish. You know, I speak Spanish, so I grew up. Taco trucks are a thing in Austin, so like we grew up around Latinos. Like that's not like we grew up around Latinos. So when I went to prison and they were talking about a riot between the Blacks and the Mexicans, I was like, that's a riot between y'all. That ain't got nothing to do with me. That's y'all. And I had to deal with some heat, you know.
Because in prison with racial tension amongst different groups, man, it always involves you, whether it doesn't or not. The technicality is you're involved.
And that's where being a Muslim helped also, right? Because I was able to employ our Umar as peacemakers. I
Right.
was able to employ the Umar as a way to kind of be, that thing that
The
allowed us,
mediator.
yeah, the mediator. And because
Right.
I was the coordinator, that allowed me to play this role, right?
Right.
So yeah, anyway.
All right. Lewis, you have to
Yes.
get out of here. We
I have to
understand.
get out of here. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Lewis.
joining us on your
Been a blessing,
birthday.
brother.
Awesome.
Happy and healthy and safe birthday.
We definitely have to bring you back.
I'm
And
available. Y'all
always-
find me Lewis Conway Jr. I'm not on Facebook Live, but I am on Twitter or LinkedIn. Richard, Seth, thank y'all so much.
Thank you for joining us. We'll put up your handles so people can write that down if they want to connect with you. But thank
It's
you for
my
joining
name.
us.
Yeah.
And what are you
Thank
having
you
for
all.
dinner? Where are you going?
Sushi, baby? Is it? Huh? Babe, is it sushi? Is it sushi or?
Sushi.
Sushi.
I think it's sushi or nachos. I think she found some Asian nachos or something.
Asian sushi
Fusion.
nachos.
Some
That
fusion.
sounds
Sushi
good
ball.
to me.
Sounds like a
Enjoy your
prison meal.
dinner.
All right, I appreciate you.
Happy birthday, Lewis.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Happy birthday.
Well.
Enjoy yourself. Have a great night.
All right. The conversation continues here on the yard
Always.
because what happens in prison, which is a very weird sort of phenomenon that one doesn't experience in life, is you have these people you're living with that you become enormously close to, and they're part of your everyday life. And then one day they say goodbye and they're gone completely.
Poof.
And it's like they never ever existed. And
Right.
that's sort of like if you get, you become friendly with people, they become part of your everyday life, and then they just disappear. So it's like sort of being divorced 11 times a week, from a loved one almost, right? Dave?
Right.
Good way to put it.
People go home, people get released early, people get moved to other prisons.
Yeah.
Did you are there people that you were friendly with in prison, D, that you've remained friendly, or is that sort of in your past?
Oh, believe it or not, absolutely. No, absolutely. Like this brothers that I connected with at such a strong level. Like one brother I connected with out of Brooklyn. He went home like a year before me. He was in Brooklyn. He came to Rhode Island. He grabbed my son, took my son out, got him tennis shoes, like a couple years before I was even coming home. So I definitely built like strong relationships that to this day are still solid relationships. And I met some of the greatest individuals in prison,
Yeah.
even more so than people that I grew up with that knew me all my life, right? That I grew up with, friends that abandoned me when I went to prison, mistreated me or disrespected me in some form or fashion. And I built this whole new life with people that have been incarcerated.
I was going to ask Lewis about this, exactly what you just said. For me, I mean, going to prison is certainly nothing, that I suggest anyone go through if they can avoid it. And, there's a lot about it that's awful. But one of the things that I found most heartbreaking about the experience is how certain, what I thought were dear friends, how utterly and completely they let me down, how they completely deserted me at the time that I most needed them. Did you go through that, Seth? Did you have that experience?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It also highlighted the people that are on the other side of that for me too, right? That are like with you no matter what kind of shit you're in and all of that too. So I mean, and I think it's great. I mean, there's people that I talk to now that wouldn't talk to me at all, while I was down, and I know where they stand, and it's cool, and I get it.
How can you accept that though? Why would you talk to them if they so utterly
left you for dead, basically?
It's not my journey. It's their journey. Like I was never exposed to the prison system before I went to the prison. Like, and they, and I had to learn how to handle it like in a flash pan, right? Like, okay, you're in it now, you figure it out. And other people don't get that. They're like, oh, how I handle it is I don't want to handle it. Like I'm, whatever it is.
So you disconnect from the whole thing.
Are you? Maybe I misunderstood. Did you say that you have people who are your friends, they disappeared when you went to prison, but now you're out, they want to become once again friends with you? Is that what you mean?
You didn't misunderstand it. Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't do
would
it.
look upon that as a terrible betrayal when I most needed them. And every
Agreed.
time I'd look at them, I would only see disappointment.
I think it's a blessing because I know who I go to war with and who I don't. And you know, the people that, you know, and to you guys' point about the bond that's created, like I didn't do time with one guy, but like we went to halfway house at the same time. And you know how prison is, it's like the basketball realm, right? You go, oh, this dude was on this yard and this dude was over here and this dude knows so and so and yada yada yada. And so we get to the halfway house at the same time, and this guy knows a lot of the same people. And that was 6 years ago, and he's one of my best friends, you know, today. So it's like, you know, stuff that just you go through shit and you create a bond, but you also know like who you don't, you know, who's not gonna go shit with you, you know, through shit with you.
I honestly, I hardly deal with anybody from my past at all that I grew up with, that I knew in the game.
Yeah.
Done. Over.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. We have a bunch of people in our audience who have been in prison and have very strong opinions about what we're talking about. And some of them, their attitude is, excuse me if I'm offending anybody, but their attitude is fuck them. You know, they weren't your friends. They proved it, and they're lost.
Exactly.
And
fuck them.
which is sort of the way I look at it. You know, and others are more like you, I think, Seth, that, you know, they were just not prepared. It wasn't their choice to go to prison. They couldn't deal with it, but they love you and they want to, you know.
Or maybe they don't, and that's fine too.
Shit,
I don't know.
That's a hard one, bro.
Yeah.
What
about family?
What's that?
What about family? Did you have family that deserted you or
Absolutely.
You know, disappointed you?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of my family I still haven't talked to. They're still, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they basically
resent
cut
that?
you off.
Yeah, I mean, we just haven't talked. I mean, it's not like it's and.
I mean, because you went to prison, or just because?
I mean, we talked before prison, and now.
Right, okay, got it. Yeah, say no more. The silent treatment. Oh, I get it.
I'm not the smartest.
Speaks volumes, right? The silent treatment speaks volumes.
Yeah, exactly.
Shit.
Kalila Ola Kunola. I apologize if I massacred your name, Kalila.
We're ashamed, right? Yeah, we talk about family all the time, Richard.
Sorry?
We talk about the effects being incarcerated has on family all the time.
The prison.
Kalila writes, that was the most challenging experience for me, being left to face the time alone.
Yeah.
Which is pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah. No,
that was your case, right, Richard? That's you faced it alone, right?
Me?
Yeah. Save your sister?
I have a sister who was amazingly supportive.
Right.
And in my corner every step of the way. A younger brother who also, and my biggest disappointment in life, other than in myself, or 3 or 4 people who I considered my brothers, who for one reason or another, deserted me.
Abandoned you, yeah.
And they all have reached out subsequent, to my release, to try to apologize and blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay, I don't walk around, I don't wish ill
chip on your shoulder.
You, but I mean, I do have a chip on my shoulder. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. It broke my heart, honestly.
Yo, trust me, I know the feeling, bro.
I know, it's terrible, right?
It really is. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm almost bringing tears to my eyes, honestly, because I'm thinking about like how I felt in those fucking dark fucking times by myself when I was out there doing what I was doing, looking out for people, family, friends, and they all abandoned me and left me for dead.
Yep.
It's bullshit, man.
Yeah, but you find out the people that are there for you too. You know what I mean? It's like, and whether it's guys that or men and women, or whatever, your male prison, female prison, like that you meet inside, that becomes the new, right? And one of the great things about being down was like, you get to meet whoever the fuck you want. Like it's there. The prison system doesn't discriminate, right? There we had everybody on the yard, right? Like you know, guys that were coming from the USPs and you know, and on down, and guys going the other way, right? Fucking around at the camp and going up. So, you know, you get to recreate, you know, a lot of that stuff. And I mean, everybody deals with this differently, man. You know, like you can, like Lewis said it best, man. I think he's just like, I put it down at the altar and was just like, yo, you know, my grandma used to say, my grandma was amazing. She was a beast. She used to say, you know, we'll just do what we do. We'll let God sort it out. Right. Like, it's just like, okay, you know, you handle what you can handle and go. So, yeah.
You know, I mean, this is a microcosm of your personality. It's accepting, it's loving. D, if your family members came to you and if they heard the way you just expressed yourself, the pain that you shared, and if they came to you and they say, you know something, we failed you, please forgive us. Do you think you have that forgiveness in your heart?
I mean, for my family, yeah, man. I mean, like my mother was my mother's situation is what really led to my criminality and me just coming from a middle-class life to a criminal lifestyle and becoming, you know, so, you know, adopting that life and just living it to the fullest, but really wanting to escape it and wanting to do better and wanting to take her away from drugs and get out of the projects. But like friends, man, like I have no friends. Like everybody I grew up with, childhood friends, people that were in the drug game with me that I looked out for, that I fucking took care of, I gave money to. I did everything I could do because I was real and I was authentic and I was true. And, you know, we're in the streets together, we're in a struggle together. Like all them, man, they could never ever come at me. You know what I'm saying? And now that they see me doing what I'm doing now, change my life around, excelled, elevated my life. Oh, they try to hit me up on you know, on Facebook, this, that, and the third. Like, but not apologetically, just more, oh, yeah, I see you doing your thing. Like, I don't need your support. I don't need none of that. You know what I'm saying? Save my mother. Everybody else can go fuck themselves, man. That's how I feel. Part of my language. That's how I feel, man.
Hey,
that's your reality. You went through it.
Just because Lewis got a medical rec move, you know, doesn't mean that we're still not on the yard, you know? Anything goes.
Yeah. Yeah, we're on the yard. We're in prison right now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're my buddy, D. I'd like to give you a hug right now. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, man, I didn't expect like that though to trigger all that, but like that's just how that's just real, man. That's like being real. Like this is the yard, man. We're real, we're authentic. We're the realest and rawest prison talk on the fucking internet, man. You know what I'm saying? And we're unique in that way. We bring the realness, and it's real shit we deal with, man. People don't understand. Like they just think, oh, you went to prison, the laws of this, and then like, yo, I went to prison at 19 years old. The judge told me when he sentenced me, consider it like going away to college. Like I'm like, you fucking serious? Going away to college? Like this ain't no college I know of. Like, come on, man. I had a 3-year-old son at 16. I'm 19 going to prison. My son's 3 years old. Like that's like I worked and struggled for 12 cents an hour and made it to Unicorn to make $100 a month to live and survive off that, because nobody in the streets, of all the money I gave them, hundreds of thousands of dollars that I had in the streets, people owed me, whatever it was, they didn't send me a dime. So I had to live off $100 a month. And I sent half of that home to my son. Like I'm eating ramen noodles for 7 years of my life. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
And I was lucky.
I went through that too. All the favors, all the help, all the good times, you know, when you need it. All right, let's not dwell on this, because we're all doing things, you know, that are positive, and you know, success is the best revenge. Right?
Gotta agree.
I want to do something that we do every week, and I'm definitely in the mood for it right now. And it's what I call my rant. Like Divine, there are things that piss me off to no end. And I just want to share something that's been on my mind this week, particularly. And by my expressing it, you know, it'll help me a little bit letting it go, maybe. In the past, I've spoken about our bail system, and anybody who knows anything about criminal justice knows where I'm going with this. There is a presumption of innocence that's very basic tenet about our country. The concept that you're innocent until proven guilty. Unfortunately, that concept of innocence until proven guilty does not apply at all for those people who can't afford to make bail and instead are left to rot away essentially in jail while they're awaiting their court date. In my case, I had a federal case, and federal cases are almost always pled out. That means that rather than run the risk of going to trial where I'd have to prove my innocence, which I wasn't, but in trial, a overzealous assistant U.S. attorney for a federal case trying to make his or her bones is going to push the judge for the most incredibly harsh sentence just so they can have that on their record. Now, a person could either face that or they will admit their guilt, whether they're guilty or not, in order to accept a much lighter sentence. There are many people who, however, are in the criminal justice system, and for whatever reason, they insist on having their day in court. Now, in order for the court and the government to feel comfortable that the person charged will actually show up for their day in court, they demand that there is a cash bail or other assets are put up as collateral to ensure that they're going to show up in court. In my case, I didn't have a penny to my name. So my sister put up collateral for my bail so I could be out, and she put up her home. And the court knew that I was not about to jeopardize her home, that I would not disappear. And that's in fact the case. But many people don't have the means. They don't have a sister with a house, or they don't have the means to make bail. Disproportionately, from a statistical point of view, these are people of color. And as a result, then they stay locked up as if they had already been found guilty, when in fact that had never, ever occurred until they have their day in court. Sometimes that can take years before they have their day in court. So they're sitting in a jail, a place like Rikers Island, where I was, which is unimaginably a bad place. The New York Times, not too long ago, came out with some statistics that really is what got me so angry, that in fact, 98% of the people that are out prior to their trial, with or without bail, 98% of them stay out of trouble. And 99% of them will actually show up in court. In other words, there's almost no risk whatsoever about letting people out until it's time for their trial. The presumption of guilt, rather than the presumption of innocence, flies in the face of the Constitution and pretty much everything I think we as a country stand for, theoretically. And keep in mind, for the past year, our jails and prisons have been virtual petri dishes of coronavirus. So people are living on top of each other, eating terrible food, terrible medical care, and people are waiting for their trial, and people are getting sick, and people are dying at a startlingly high rate. Again, never have been proven guilty of anything. Now, a lot of states have done away with cash bail, but still, most still have it. I took a look at the Constitution, believe it or not, because I had to see what the Constitution said about this. The Eighth Amendment says excessive bail shall not be required. Now, what's excessive? If you have no money, $100 is excessive, and yet people can't make bail. If you're waiting in jail for months or years for your trial, there's also a very good chance you're going to get in trouble, which is just going to add to your legal problem. So all of a sudden now you are guilty of something. Or maybe you're going to piss off another inmate or a guard, and now you're going to have real trouble and you're going to have your head bashed in. Again, you've never been proven guilty of anything. Now, I can't see how anyone could possibly think this is right or fair. Does the Constitution to say nothing of our morals actually have any meaning? Or what kind of country are we at this point? That's why I'm pissed off. And I'm sorry, this is something I'm not going to change my mind about. That's my rant. I'm sticking with it. So.
Good one. A constitutional rant. I love it.
It's a constitutional rant, and it's gotten me really kind of pissed off.
Yep.
D, before we go, anything you'd like to add? Anything you're involved with that's got you excited?
I mean, yeah, everything we're doing with Commissary Club, I'm really excited about. You know, the launch of our app. It's dropping soon. Please continue to support us. The yard, spread the news about what we're doing here. We're doing great work. I believe in this work wholeheartedly. You know, it's a personal thing that I do. Same thing with Richard and Seth, like the whole team, Adrian. Like we're really trying to do something special and different in reentry, and we're trying to do it right. We're tired of everybody getting it wrong. It's been wrong for too long. We're tired of it. We're done with it. So we're individuals who are out here on the front lines, trying to make changes, and everybody can play a part in helping us, even by spreading the word, letting your friends know about the yard, let them know, you know, Commissary Club exists and the work that we're doing. And we appreciate you. And thanks for joining us.
Yep. Amen. Seth, you want to add anything?
I love you guys. That's what I want to add. I love you guys. This is always fun.
We love you too, and we love the audience
We
as
love
well.
you, Seth, and we love everybody who's hanging out here.
Absolutely.
So let me, with that love, let me thank you all for joining us tonight. Over the next month, as I've mentioned before, we have some incredible guests coming up. We've got Miss Alice Johnson, the very famous drug dealing grandmother who was pardoned by President Trump, Pulitzer Prize winning podcaster for Ear Hustle, Earlonne Woods is joining us. And what I'm really excited, the original OG, the biggest and baddest drug dealer in Los Angeles Freeway, Rick Ross, is going to be joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be doing some more events on Clubhouse. If in fact we have an event that you hear about that you'd like to be involved with, and you need an invitation to join Clubhouse, let Adrian know. We have a bunch of them. We may be able to help you. Clubhouse requires that currently you have an iPhone, but they're adding a Android also over the next couple of weeks. So you'll be able to join us there. We, as Divine mentioned, we're coming out with a brand new mobile app for Commissary Club, and I've seen it and it looks really amazing, and I think it's going to be a huge thing for us. So please, when you hear about it, download it, let us know what you think. We have a crowdfunding campaign that's going on Republic right now. If you believe in the work we're doing, plus you would like to see a terrific return on your investment, I have a long history of making my partners lots of money, and I think we're going to do it here too. Check out Commissary Club on Republic, and please follow us. When I'm done talking, there'll be a slide that'll have our ways that you can get a hold of me and Seth and Adrian. Please do tell your friends about the yard. We are thrilled and humbled to have a chance to work with the people that we do. Many of them are nothing short of heroes, truly. We've all made mistakes. God knows I have. Who hasn't? You know, let's help one another, particularly the people who have gotten into trouble. Let's be there for one another. Let's celebrate what we do have in common. We're all human beings and we need each other. So thanks a lot, folks. Really appreciate seeing you. See you next week.
One
Have a
last
good
thing
night.
before we go. I want to say
Whoa,
special
okay.
shout out to Todd Floyd from Udacity for joining us tonight. I see you, my brother. Looking forward to our conversations.
And all of our other friends. Everybody have a good night. Be
Boom.
safe.
See y'all.